Senor.
We're going to start the meeting now. First thing, Fletcher, will you lead us in the Pledge of
Pledge of
Allegiance?
Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
Mission statement. Matt, the Middletown area town hall was formed to operate as a true town hall with everyone participating and voting. However, county officials required us to elect a board to conform with other county advisory committees. Our bylaws specify that the board makes decisions based on the vote of everyone present. The board encourages all members to give their opinions and vote on every matter before the assembly.
Okay, the civility report.
We have, because we've had some interesting meetings in the past, the board came up with a civility statement. Number one, respect everyone's right to voice their opinion. Number two, listen and hear with an open mind and respect while others are speaking, even if you disagree. Three, presenting problems is okay, but please provide possible solutions. Number four, consider ways to compromise and bridge differences. Five, understand that we can agree to disagree, but we need to move forward in a productive manner, which may take time. And may I add that we always do this. No, I'm only kidding. No, but this is very important that we respect each other's opinions.
Okay.
But
Next thing, does everybody have time to look at the minutes from the last meeting? Okay, I make a motion or look for a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? Hearing no objections, approved, move forward. Correspondence, there were none this month. Committee reports, I don't believe there are any at this moment. Okay, so public input. Now we're going to shorten it up a little bit this month because we have Congressman Thompson here and he's got a lot to say. So take a minute and a half and point it out. I'll start on this side of the room. Yes, Mr. Greenberg.
Steve Greenberg, Hidden Valley Lake. There's been some rumors that there have been some delays and issues with the Community Development Office in Lakeport. And I'm just wondering if anyone has knowledge about whether people have been quitting, what the reasons for the delays and inspections are.
I can personally answer to that. Oh, go ahead. There you go.
No, it's going to be an agendized item next Tuesday that we're dealing with. Most of them are rumors, but we have some people that have left the office, and we're going to be dealing with that next week at the board meeting. So please, I encourage you, look at the agenda, come to the meeting so we can get this thing worked out as a community. So that's what we're looking for. But we are very aware of it and been working on these issues myself for day one as soon as I took office. So it's come to a head now, and it'll be on the meeting on Tuesday. So please come and give your input.
Is there a time?
I think it is a timed item. I don't have that on me right now, but if you just look on the website, you can find it right on the agenda.
Okay, down this side, none, see no hands. Back here, Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to let everyone know that next Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday, we will be shutting down part of the road on Central Park Road. We've got a permit to put our water in for our sprinkler system, so we have to do a hot tap. The road will be down to one lane, and then it will be reopened at the end of the day.
Okay, coming up this way, Marlene.
I just wanted to let everyone know we're having a movie in the park this Saturday night. It's Inside Out, and it is sponsored and hosted by Harbin Hot Springs. And Teardrop Trailer is going to start playing at 6:30. So come on down, check with your local restaurants. I know the brewery and Hardisters Both have movie night specials if you want to stop and get something to eat on your way and enjoy a movie with us. Okay, thanks. This Saturday.
Back in the course, sir?
Hi, my name is Wade Skeels, and I just wanted to, I don't know if there's any kind of an oak tree ordinance or oak tree guidelines for Lake County or for the Middletown area. I love grapes, and I think more grapes are coming our way, but hopefully not at the expense of clear-cutting oaks and the habitat, the water retention, erosion control. Oaks are, they don't require human input to survive, whereas grapes, when the prices drop, grape growers can stop growing and the oak trees are gone, and then you're left with a desert environment, and oak trees make this place really special. So I'm not against grapes or development, but I think we should start that conversation. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comment, public comment?
All right, one last one.
Go for it.
This weekend in Lower Lake, I will be attending. It is the 1 year, I don't know how to say it, not an anniversary, but they are having a celebration at an open house, the firehouse in Lower Lake, the old firehouse museum. It'll be from 10 to 2, and obviously that is somewhat of a memorial of the Clayton fire. So if you're around that day, there's going to be free food, other things. I will be there in attendance, but it is, 1 year anniversary. We got the second one coming up for the Valley Fire, so just letting you know that, just a public announcement.
Okay, yes, ma'am?
I have a question. I'm not sure this is the right time for it because I've lost track of everything. I heard at a Anderson Springs community meeting that there's funding for the sewers. However, I also heard, I heard at that meeting that there was no funding for the repair of the roads. And I would really like that clarified.
Two different subjects.
Okay.
Yeah, it is, at this point, there is funding for the sewer. That is going forward. We're moving forward with that with county. There is no extra funding to fix the roads. You're right, you did hear that. Now, the work that will be done, there is money in the budget to repair the damage to the roads that is done when the project is being done, but that's where we are at this point. In the future, obviously, SB1 and those other bills that have passed will help bring more money to the county, and we'll be working on those projects as the money comes in. Now, that is a longer-term deal. We start to see those monies here this year, but it really won't be in full effect until about 2021, 22, as far as I know. Public Works, Scott DeLeon has put out some information to that effect, and that's the process we'll be moving through.
Okay, any further public comment? All right, I'd like to move to the first agenda item, is the discussion up there of the Livermore property. Is John Woodbury here? Oh, there he is. Thank you.
Where would you like them?
Set it up wherever you like. How can I help you?
There you go. I can hold this, I can do whatever you like. All right, you just set them there, we can pass them out. There you go. All right.
Well, good evening. I'm John Woodbury. I'm the general manager for the Napa Open Space District. You're probably wondering why I'm here in this point. And here is Brendan Moriarty, who's with the Trust for Public Land. And we're here to describe tonight a project that Brendan's been working on for a long time. We've just now recently got involved with. We're still at the ground level in terms of planning this, but we wanted some input from the folks here in this room tonight, as well as in the county over the next couple of years. Sorry. So basically, first thing I want to do, just so you know who we are, I have some flyers for the Napa Open Space District. I'll pass them around. Take one if you want. It just describes who we are. Basically, our purpose is to protect open space lands and to provide parks and open space outdoor recreation opportunities. And we've been doing that for about 10 years in Napa County. This last year, we got asked by Trust for Public Land to get involved with the project they've been involved with, which is the Livermore property, also known as the Montesol Ranch, which is mostly in Napa County, but it comes into Lake County. And we're dealing with the second phase of that project. But first I wanted to have Brendan describe the first phase, and then we'll go into the second phases.
Thanks, John. So the Trust for Public Land, just a brief introduction. We're a national conservation organization. We're headquartered in San Francisco, but we've been around doing work in the Bay Area now for 45 years or so. I manage our greater San Francisco Bay Area conservation program, and our goal is to protect the land and make it available for people. And so the project that John's referring to, the kind of overall project here, which we've been working on now for about 4 years, is to protect the Montisol Ranch, the Livermore property, which is on both sides of Highway 29, and both in Lake County and in Napa County. It's about 11 square miles, and it touches Robert Louis Stevenson State Park on its one side, and then Land Trust of Napa County lands on the other side. It's just kind of it's this one sort of donut hole in this very large landscape of protected lands. So what we accomplished this January, there's 2 phases to the project. We're here to talk about the second phase, but let me just quickly say what we did with the first. The first phase completed in January, and essentially what we did was we reached an agreement with the family to extinguish the ability to subdivide the property, develop it, large-scale land conversion, planting vineyards in any large capacity, because it's essentially a wilderness today. And it has all these great attributes. Wildlife moves through there. A lot of water collects and pours down here into Lake County. We wanted to protect those resources. So we reached an agreement with the family, and that's going to be the case now in perpetuity. That property will not be developed. So if you're ever hiking up in Robert Louis Stevenson State Park and you're looking, east, and you see that great expanse of just rugged wilderness out there, that's going to stay that way now forever. So that's what we did in January. There's not any public access to that landscape as a result of what we just did. We're now working together to create some public access, and that's why we're here today. The objective now, we have an opportunity the family's given us to acquire the land, the portion of the ranch, which is west of 29. I don't know if this map is big enough for most people to see it, but
There's maps going around if they get back to it.
But Highway 29 is kind of that, you can see that running up through the middle of the map here. Most of what you're seeing in light green is Robert Louis Stevenson State Park. The darker green is that portion of this property that's west of 29. It's about 1,200 acres. And the family's given us the opportunity to actually buy that land and make it publicly accessible. So we've got until the end of 2018 to do that. We've already raised some money to pull it off. We have about $200,000 more dollars left to raise in order to be able to do that. We've got to the end of next year, 2018, to raise that money. And so that's what I'll be working on over the next year and a half or so with John. And we're here today to start engaging the community and getting folks informed about this opportunity and getting their ideas and thoughts. We're really here to listen and understand what's of interest for you.
So one other thing I should mention is that the Napa Open Space District in 2012 took over operation of 2 state parks, both in Napa Valley State Park and the Belle Gristmill State Historic Park. We are now in the process of finalizing a new operating agreement with state parks. Under that new agreement, we will also be managing Robert Louis and Stevenson State Park. And since we'll be managing all of RLS, it just made sense for us to be, and that's why TPL came to us, is will we also manage this adjacent land to the north side of the park. And since there's really no entity at this point in Lake County that could step up to the plate and do this, we've agreed to fill that role. Okay, we've agreed to fill that role. But we really, other than protecting the state park boundary, and other than providing eventual access, hiking access from the north side up to the peak, that's all we've got in our plans. Other than that, it's a blank slate. We're looking for input, for advice, your suggestions as to what you would like to see happen in this area or not like to see happen. And then the other thing I should say is it's not a quick process. So don't get too anxious. This is really the very first step. In terms of the timeline going forward, as Brendan said, sometime between now and the end of 2018, we need to finish raising the money and actually do the purchase. After that, we then have to develop a plan for the property, a draft plan. Then we have to do environmental review of that draft plan. And then we have to come to both Lake County and Napa County for land use permits. Each one of those steps has an opportunity for further public input. Frankly, though, I'd like to have the input as early as possible so we can actually reflect what people want to see as opposed to what we in our own heads have dreamed up. So this can start tonight. I have business cards here I'll leave for anyone who wants it. Please give me a call or email me if you have other ideas. Next Tuesday morning, we're going to be back here in Middletown with the Merchants Association doing the same discussion. So there's another opportunity for FaceTime if you want it right away. But I think any time over the next couple of years is a good time for public input. At this point, if you have any questions or comments,
I have a question.
Okay?
When I was first notified by you, John, that you were interested in this, I went to some people in town that had been here a long time, and I asked them what they thought about this project. And given the location of the property, they had no questions at all about it. The only question that ever came up was the spring there on 29.
Rattlesnake Spring.
Rattlesnake Spring.
Right.
Will that continue to be open to the public, or is that something that down the road the trust will take over and restrict somehow?
Got it. You want me to
Well,
answer that?
you can start and see if I have any more.
So just to ground folks, the property, the Montisol Ranch surrounds Rattlesnake Spring. Rattlesnake Spring is pulling water out of the ground that's getting into the ground on this property. So part of the purpose of this first phase of protecting the property was to make sure that that water supply was secure, because we want to see that spring persist and see the water flowing in perpetuity. So there'll be no changes.
That's not the question. Of course, everyone wants to see. The question is, will the public have access to the spring and to that water?
They will. There'll be no changes in the access to the spring whatsoever. And John, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, the only thing I would add is that so far it's not clear to me exactly where the property line is and whether the spring itself is on Caltrans property or Whittemore
I
property.
think it's on Caltrans.
Well, I've heard both answers. So I need to figure that out. If it's on Caltrans property.
But that's
up
an
to them.
issue, just so
That
you
is,
know.
yeah.
That's going to be an issue.
Thank you.
That property was an old Girl Scout camp, and there's still cabins, and and that's on that property,
No,
correct?
that's across the road.
It's across.
So the old Girl Scout camp is on the east side of 29. The entrance to this, the main entrance to this new property would be on the west side, almost directly across the street from where that camp was, but it's a separate, property. That's not for sale.
Yeah, my name's Robert Hall. A couple of things here. I'm a little confused looking at this map because it doesn't match what was in the Lake County News link, where that map showed property owners and it doesn't show any of this as property owners.
Okay.
I mean, it's major because I'm adjacent, according to this, I'm adjacent to this phase 2 thing. What I would suggest is that you guys follow the lead up in Stevenson Park and limit access from sunrise to sunset. We don't need campers up there. We don't need fires. We had a fire up there, a campfire last Saturday that was a big problem. There's been multiple fires in the 43 years I've lived here. So I don't want to see campers or forest fires up there. The last question is access.
Can I ask one thing? Would you come back next month?
If the date works, absolutely.
We have plenty of time to
We
discuss
got
this.
plenty of time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to, normally I'd allow this to go on, but we've got a gentleman, our congressman here, we want to get to him, he's got a lot of important things. We'd like to go through this in detail instead of rush through it next month if that meets with everybody's approval.
Well, I would,
No. You've had a long day, let me tell you, so. We'd love to do this, and we believe everything's.
let me finish. I'm going to be civil.
Shit.
But he's here to collect input. And here's my input. Don't let campers in there, limit it to the state park hours, sunrise to sunset. Thank you.
John, can we guarantee you to come back next month?
We need to look at the date and calendar, but I plan on it.
We have plenty of time for public input. Is that correct?
Hang on here, date will be, just a second here, next month will be the 14th.
I assume it's okay, but
Okay.
we'll check and get back to you.
September 14th.
Yeah, that's a Thursday.
That's a Thursday, second Thursday of the month.
Yeah.
That doesn't
We're
work
good?
in
It
October.
works for me. I don't know about John.
Okay.
I need to check the calendar.
We're all good? One last question in the back?
A large portion of this proposed property is landlocked right now, and it's very rugged. I don't see how you're gonna get access to like the northwest side of it, where Sacred Gap and Tomtai Rock is.
If any access would be on trails, it wouldn't be motorized access.
Okay.
That's tough country.
And
Okay, ma'am, one last one. Then we'll go to next month, okay?
It does show
side to the edge of the property. There is not a right of way there to that property line.
What I should say about that map, just it says preliminary draft at the top. It's not been ground truth.
So there's
This
not
is-
going to be any eminent domain.
No, there's no eminent domain. We have no power of eminent domain.
Making
There would be no eminent domain.
trail or allowing vehicles to my private property.
There would be no crossing of private property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Again, we will put this on the agenda for next month. For next math meeting. And we'll have we'll go from
Well,
there.
I must say, I really appreciate the interest, and I will come back and we'll have some time to discuss this. Thank you.
We'll have a good discussion next month, okay? In the meantime,
Would anyone like a card?
first of all, I want to acknowledge Moke Simon, our District 1 supervisor here.
I'll take your card.
He's working hard to help on this. It's the latest of the fire situation in the county and all that. It's a long process, and bless all his efforts and all that. Next, I would like to say the next guy that works very hard every day that we don't see, who's given to this country in many ways, is our Congressman Mike Thompson. And we all have to appreciate everything he does daily for us. With that, Congressman Mike Thompson.
Can you hear me without the microphone?
Yes. Yes.
Everybody okay? Oh, good. Well, thank you. I'm here tonight to make sure you didn't get to ask the land trust guys all the questions you wanted to ask. Thanks for letting me blame.
You're used to it, right? Yeah.
It's really an honor for me to be able to be back with you. And this is the district work period for Congress. We're in recess. We're out in our districts. I've been going around meeting with people throughout our 5 counties. Been holding a lot of public meetings this time, and more so than ever before. And a lot of you have known me for a long time, and I used to do a lot of town hall meetings, and I quit doing them. And I quit doing them because I'd go to all the trouble to put them on. My staff would go to all the trouble to put them on. We'd advertise them, and 8 people would show up. And I'm serious about that. Very small numbers of people. So I stopped doing them. I started doing telephone town hall meetings where they would automatically dial and put people on. And those were very successful. We'd get up to 25,000, 30,000 people at a time on the line, depending upon the subject matter. And then after a while, those started to tail off too, so we quit doing those. And then there was a little event that took place in November that really got people engaged. And right after the election, I had a number of people come to me and say, we need to talk to you. We need to have a forum. We're worried, we're concerned, whatever the issues were. And so I had one on just a couple days' notice. We had about 300 people there. And I started having town hall meetings. I had one in Lake County. I had one, and there was, I don't know, probably 250, 300 people there. I had one in Vallejo, about 350 people there. I had one in Napa, and we had a venue that would accommodate 100 people more than RSVP'd, and we ended up turning away 250 people. Same thing happened in Martinez. And I had one over in Santa Rosa, and we had 2,300 people at the gymnasium at Pioneer High School. The high school at Sonoma, 450 people showed up. So there's a lot of interest in this. And then a couple weeks ago, I had a Sonoma Day, and we had a meeting that the people had to cancel. And one of my staff people said, let's do a pop-up coffee clutch. So I'll just put it out on my text here and email people in the valley and see what happens. So we did an ad hoc coffee clutch at a coffee shop in the Sonoma Valley, and we had 78 people show up in a matter of no time at all. So that's the kind of interest that we've been having. Had a coffee clutch today up in Lakeport, had one down in Pinole, had one in Martinez, had one in Vallejo, and people are really interested in knowing what's going on. People seem to be much more involved, and I'm very appreciative in that, because I want to know what people are thinking. I want to know what your concerns are, and I appreciate the opportunity to let you know what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do and what's going on in Congress. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to come this evening. And I'll just lay out a couple of things that are going on. I'm sure I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't know. The big news in Washington, D.C. of late has been the efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I think everybody knows what happened there. The effort failed. It doesn't mean it's gone forever. I think there's still folks who want to take this up. Clearly the president wants it repealed. The people across the country are at odds with them on this. The poll numbers are pretty strong. People like the Affordable Care Act a lot more so today than they did when it was passed. And the Congressional Budget Office did their analysis, and they said that if the repeal took place, somewhere around 25 million people would lose their health care. And I don't think anyone is in favor of taking 25 million people off the health care rules. What we need to do is figure out how both sides of the political spectrum can come together and work on the Affordable Care Act to make improvements, to expand it, to bring more people coverage and access to quality, affordable health care. And that's what we should be doing. Talk right now is turned to tax reform. That was one of the issues, was a campaign promise by the president, if you remember. And in fact, I think he said he was going to do it on either the health care thing or the tax reform on day one or day three. Not working out, a little bit more complicated than a candidate may have thought it to be. But tax reform is something that there is bipartisan agreement on. The tax code does need to be reformed. But I want to leave you with one thought, and that is there's a stark difference between tax reform and a tax cut. And I have concerns with some of the discussion that's taking place in Washington right now. I will not vote for a tax cut that is not paid for. And I haven't in the past, and I won't start now. And the land trust guys were just here, and they probably would tell you that one of the things that I've done since I've been in Congress was I wrote the new law for conservation easements that allow people to stay on their ag land, their open space land, but provide a conservation easement so it can't be developed in the future. That was my law. It was passed. It was paid for. When it expired, I rewrote the law and we put a clause in it to make it permanent. Had a pay for in it. By the time it got to the House floor, the majority party had taken the pay for out, and it was vote for it, extend the law, make it permanent, but don't pay for it. And that's tantamount to spending a bunch of money and sending the bill to our grandchildren. I had to stand on the floor of the House and ask my colleagues to vote against my own bill. And I also voted against my bill. I just think it's wrong to vote for tax cuts that aren't paid for. So I want you to know that up front. And I'm concerned that because so much time has been spent over the last 70 days spinning wheels instead of moving forward, that there's very little runway left to do any major policy. And something as important as tax reform needs to be bipartisan. As I said, it needs to be paid for. It needs to be revenue neutral. I don't think it should be tax cuts that are balanced on the backs of those who are depending upon the government for other important things. And by no stretch of the imagination should it be a giveaway to the richest people in the country, especially at the expense of middle class and working class people. So there's very little runway this year in Congress to complete this. And that's why you're hearing talk about combining infrastructure investment with tax reform, which I'm all for. I have no problem with doing that, but I do have a problem with making a Christmas tree out of a piece of legislation, funding something popular such as infrastructure, which I support wholeheartedly, to pass bad tax policy. I think that's bad public policy. My concern is that because there's just a short time left, and because the president has said right along that people are going to get so tired of us winning that they're going to want to stop winning. And I'm afraid that in the need for a win, they're going to revert to just a tax cut and try and push that through. And I think if that happens, I think that's going to be bad policy, and I think it's going to be disastrous. The other big issue that everyone is well aware of, and that's our dilemma with North Korea. I think it's serious. I'm concerned about it. The last thing we need is any war. The absolute last thing we need is a nuclear war of any size, shape, or form. And we have a lot of allies, we have a lot of Americans in that region of the world. And right now, it's a pretty hyped up mess right now. And I think we need to be working overtime to talk people back from the brink rather than drumming up vitriolic, bombastic discussion about what's going to happen. And it doesn't seem that that's the type of decorum that's coming out of the White House, and that bothers me. I believe we ought to really amp up our diplomatic efforts, work with our allies in that region, certainly bring back the six-party talks, and I'm not opposed to two-party talks. I think we need to engage the North Koreans. There's a new South Korean president who wants to engage the North Koreans. I don't think that's something out of the realm of possibility. I'm sure that we're probably all on the same page in regard to the opinion in which we hold Kim Jong-un. I don't think he's on anybody's top 10 list in this room, and I agree with that. He's a lot of things, but I'm pretty sure he's not suicidal. If you think about the deal he's got going, it's a pretty good gig. He's the head of the country. Everybody there is starving, except him. He's eating well. We know from intelligence reports that we know he likes good Cabernet, and I think bourbon or scotch or something. I don't remember specifically. He's got his own private circus. That's something that he likes. He gets to hang out with Dennis Rodman. So he's got a pretty good gig going on. And I don't think he wants to end it. If he launches a first strike, so that he will be absolutely annihilated, as will most of North Korea. And I don't think he's suicidal. So my concern right now isn't him launching first strike. My concern is that he becomes fearful that we're going to launch first strike, and he says, I'm going out anyway, I may as well take some folks with me. That's very dangerous. So I think we need to fully engage diplomatically, and to do that, I think we need to be fully staffed up diplomatically. We have tons of positions in the State Department that have not been filled. Appointments have not been made. I think that's a mistake. We don't have an ambassador in South Korea nor in Japan. I think that's a huge mistake. Those are the people that do the everyday face-to-face work that keep us away from situations that could turn nuclear. I think that's a huge problem. And then one last thing I'll say, and then just open it up for questions, is I started an effort in the House 4.5 years ago when I was named the chairman of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. It happened after the terrible tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut, and we've been trying to figure out ways to ensure that people who shouldn't have guns don't get guns, figure out a way to depress gun violence. The way that I've come up with is expansion of background checks. There are many states across the country that don't require background checks for the purchase of weapons other than from a licensed, federally licensed dealer. I think that's wrong. It's short-sighted, and I suspect that everybody would agree with me that there's some people, notwithstanding my strong support of the Second Amendment, there's some people who just shouldn't get their hands on a gun. Criminals shouldn't have guns. Dangerously mentally ill people shouldn't have guns, and we need some way to minimize them getting their hands on guns. And the best way, in my view, is to have a background check, so before someone buys a gun, they're at least checked. It won't solve all the problems, but I think it should be the federal government's first line of defense. I'm still working on that, and it's been an offensive effort for 4.5 years trying to do this. this year it's turned to be a little bit of a defensive effort as well. There's a pretty strong push in two bills that are in Congress that I think are anti-law enforcement. I think they're anti-public safety, and I think it would be foolish to go forward with them. One is a bill that would allow anybody in any of the 50 states who has a permit to carry a concealed weapon to be able to carry that weapon in any of the 50 states. I think it's a race to the bottom. I kind of like the program that we have in California where local law enforcement interviews you and determines whether or not you meet the criteria and whether or not you're someone who should have a firearm. And I don't think it would be good if local law enforcement, if Brian Martin said, you don't qualify for whatever reason, and so you come home, this law passes, and then you call up a county in some state that has literally a call-in requirement to get a concealed carry permit. You make a phone call, you get a concealed carry permit, and you're living next door with your concealed carry. I don't think that's good policy. And the other one is a bill, and this can only happen in Congress. The name of the bill is the Hearing Protection Act of 2017. And what that bill does is it allows for the over-the-counter sale of silencers. If you're a gun guy, and I think most of you know I am, and you're concerned about your hearing, buy earplugs.
Yeah.
Silencers only reduce the sound by a limited number of decibels. What silencers do, unlike the movies that we've all seen, they don't silence the shot. It disperses the shot. And there's countless examples of law enforcement responding to an active shooter and being able to pinpoint where the shots come from and respond. If these things are more available and in wider use, it's going to make it terribly difficult for law enforcement to respond. And if you care about wildlife, I would suggest that it's probably a poacher's dream to be able to have those, and that wouldn't be good public policy from a wildlife perspective either. So that's kind of what's happening in DC. The district's looking good. I can tell you that. I've been, as I said, throughout the entire time we've been back, I've been from one end of the district to the other a number of times. What I see in the district is heartening. People are working really hard. They're plugged in. The other thing that's happened since that event that I mentioned in November is people seem to be much more involved in their community, much more involved in their future. So activity, not just at town hall meetings, but every place is a lot higher. People are doing great things and they're involved. And it seems that every place I go, I see something that's pretty wonderful. Up at the hospital today, they've got a program that they've rolled out for mothers with new babies to deal with crib death and to help post delivery depression issues. It's a great program. They've got a lot of local sponsors. Moak took me over today to the City of Hope project, and that's looking great. We saw some wonderful houses that are being built, and it's just heartening to see everybody in the community working hard to make sure that things go well. And with that, I'll entertain questions, or I'll try and answer questions. I'll listen to concerns, whatever you have. How do you want to do that?
Well,
yes, ma'am.
There you go.
You're in charge.
What is the most effective thing that citizens can do in terms of the situation with North Korea to show that we, the citizens of the world, do not want war?
The most important thing, who can do?
Citizens.
Citizens?
Yeah,
I think you need to speak up.
but is there a best way
I'm going to
of
tell you.
doing that?
I'm going to tell you. I think you should speak up, and I think all channels are fair game. I think letters to the editor. I think phone calls to your mother-in-law, sister-in-law, brother, sorority sister, army buddy, cousin, uncle, whomever in other parts of the country. Let them know. Let them tell them to contact their member of Congress. By all means, contact me. One thing that I hear a lot of in our district is, you know, we're with you, you're with us. What good does it do to contact you? It does a lot of good. we like hearing that people are behind us. That I think I'm speaking for you when I do this. It's good to know that we are. Call me, email me. Senators Feinstein and Harris, same thing.
One quick thing on that, though. They say behind every good man is a good woman, okay? But in the case of Congressman Thompson, Brad sitting in the back is one of the best. So I just want to let everybody know there's a gentleman that is very, very active with working with our community in the county and all that, and he deserves a lot. Congressman Thompson, he's given his career and that to the military and to the people, but I also wanted to recognize Brad.
Brad does a great job. But whenever you say that, whenever you say behind every man there's a great woman, I think of that comic who said, yeah, like Beethoven's wife, who when he said that he wanted to write music, she said, ha 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 ha. Or Eli Whitney's wife who said, keep your cotton picking hands off the gym.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
So I want to address universal health care, and I want to thank you for co-sponsoring HR 676, which is the expanded Medicare for all. So I just wanted to know, to what extent are you actively advocating for that so that it might actually come into being instead of continuing on this path with insurance companies being involved with controlling our health care?
Well, I would like to see some form of single-payer health care. And I don't stand alone. I don't stand alone. The medical profession, I hear from more and more doctors on about a daily basis how they would like to not have to argue with insurance companies, with everything else. So it's not something that's pie in the sky. The whole boogaboo man, what do they call it, socialized medicine, it's going to be terrible, you're going to be waiting in lines. I don't buy into that at all. I have been the recipient of socialized medicine. You mentioned I was in the military. When I got to the Army, I left with fewer wisdom teeth than I went with, and that was socialized dentistry that took those out. Worked pretty well. And as most of you know, I was shot up in Vietnam, and I received socialized medical care from the single-payer medical that the Army had. Treated me well. Most of everything still works. And they did a good job. So I'm not afraid of that. I have friends in Canada, and all the stories you hear about the long lines and stuff. I've never heard that from a Canadian. A couple of years ago on an intelligence committee trip into Europe, one of my colleagues had an accident and required pretty extensive medical care. And I think he paid like $125 for all the work that he had done. So I don't think it's the boogaboo, but I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think we've got a system, and after World War II, in our country, we developed a healthcare delivery system based on employer-provided healthcare, and that's the system that we have. And that's been going on for whatever 1944 from 2017 is. And it's worked well to not so well over those years. And there's going to be a slow change in that process, and our systems change slowly. But I think there's things that we can do to address that. First and foremost, I think we need to keep the Affordable Care Act. That's incredibly important. Second, I think we need to make improvements in the Affordable Care Act to fix some of the things that are wrong with it, to change some things that will provide better access to more people for quality health care. And then I think there's some other things that work well, like the public option in the Affordable Care Act. And we put that in when we first wrote it, and it didn't have the support to go through. But that would mean that if you go to the exchange to buy health care, you take your pick. You can buy Blue Cross, you can buy Anthem, you can buy Kaiser, or you could buy a public option. and that fell out. I think if that was in there, it would suppress prices, and I think it would give people more options. So I think that would be a good one. And then I'm the co-author of legislation that would expand access to Medicare for people over 50 years of age. I think that's an important way to go. Yes.
I'd like to thank you for the efforts you put into those weekly lessons, talks on the internet. I watch them and it really helps keep me informed. You ought to
thank
tell
you.
everybody how to do that.
Meet Mike Monday.
Yeah, meet Mike. But my comment has to do with redistricting. We got another census coming up, and I know it's a couple years away and you don't have time to think about it right now,
I've been thinking about a lot.
I am really tired of our courts being clogged with different states doing different methods of figuring out how all these districts work, and I think a lot of it is crooked. Seems to me Congress ought to be able to come up with a way that it's done, and that's how it's done everywhere. And get on with being fair and square. What do you think?
I agree with you. I think redistricting is a problem, and there's a number of states that I believe are fully invested in political gerrymandering, and I think that's wrong. California took it out of the hands, the voters took it out of the hands of the legislature, created this nonpartisan commission to draw the lines, and already there's people trying to figure out how to undermine that. So that's you don't just pass something and then say it's fixed and forget it. So that's something that has to be watched. But redistricting is so messed up, especially in some of the Midwestern and Southern states. And it's already illegal to do racial gerrymandering. Yeah. And there's a case that has been accepted by the U.S. Supreme Court to deal with the issue of political gerrymandering. And I'm hopeful that the court will correct that. If not, it's going to take congressional action. You're right, or state action. States can do it themselves. But it's favoring the majority, the legislative majorities in those states, and so they're not going to do it on their own. There's a couple of bills in Congress. I'm a co-author of one that would require a commission system to do redistricting, and I think that would help a lot.
Thank you.
Are you familiar with H.R. 809?
I don't know. What is it?
It's the Foster Act. It's about Agent Orange use in Guam.
No, I'm not.
Okay. It was initiated February 1st of this year. I would like you to look at it. There's thousands of veterans out there that served in the Vietnam era that are contaminated by the use in Guam.
I agree.
One man, Sergeant Leroy Foster, told me tonight on an email that he sprayed almost 8 million gallons of herbicides in Guam. I personally sprayed herbicide in Guam at the naval facility. And now I look in retrospect and I say, oh my God, we kept the grass off of the lawns, we kept it back off the highway, the jungle. We never had a lawnmower. How the hell did we do that? So I'd like you to check into that.
Okay.
And my second comment is for Mr. Moak. The people at the DSO service office over in Lakeport, they do a tremendous job. What they do over there and what they do at the VA clinic here, they're right on top of things. So, can I give a package to your person back here?
Absolutely. Hand to Brad.
A copy of H.R. 809.
And it may be in the works in my office. I don't know the number, and I would be surprised if I'm not already a co-author, because I've done a lot of work on for veterans in regard to exposure to chemicals. Not only Agent Orange, but if a little side note, when I first got to Congress, I was contacted by a constituent in Eureka who told me that he was involved in a classified program for the Navy called Project SHAD, Shipboard Hazardous something or other. And he said that the DOD denies that it exists, VA won't give anybody any help, and he said, I was a captain in the Navy at the time, and everybody under my command, myself included, has some form of weird cancer today.
I'm included.
This guy told me, he said, we hauled barges out off the coast of San Diego with caged animals in it, and then they would come by and spray with aircraft. And he said, they told us that there was simulants. He said, and I believe them. He said, but we would clean the barges and the cages afterwards, He said, I'm afraid that there was, in those solvents, there was something that has made us sick. And so I went after DOD, and he told me, he said, my predecessor went after him. They told him there was no problem, there was never a project shad, and he just dropped it. So I went after, I trusted this guy, I've known him for a while, I trusted him, and I stayed on it like the proverbial dog on the bone. And I got the DOD to admit there was in fact a project shad.
We're in the same situation.
And then they said there was, but all we sprayed were simulants. And I said, well, you've been lying to us for over 40 years, and now you want me to believe that it was only simulants? So I raised holy hell in Congress as a freshman member and really stirred up the pot. Well, all these veterans from all these different states started contacting me and their member of Congress, and I was part of this thing. I'm sick. So long story short, DOD came back and said, well, we were spraying some of these chemicals, but it was only trace elements. They were spraying sarin gas, VX nerve gas, E. coli, some of the most deadly chemicals in the world on our own people. And so we've still been fighting. I tried to get language in the appropriation bill this last month for full disclosure of all their records. And they balked at that, and I came back with, well, if there's something in there that should be classified, you can redact that, but we need all the records so we can hunt these veterans down and get them the help that they need. They wouldn't even go along with that. But the good news is I have 3 Republican co-authors now as a result of me bringing it to the Appropriation Committee. So I think we're going to dig down and really get some answers. But I can't imagine me not being supportive of that bill.
Thank you very
You
much.
bet.
Yeah, you talked about engagement, and you talked about November of 16 a couple of times, and about how there's almost no engagement before the 16 election. There's been great engagement after it. I think we're looking at what's happening in Korea right now because we were engaged. And could you just, I don't even know what I'm trying to ask, is could you tell me what you would suggest, or what would you tell everybody here, how to be more engaged, and how it doesn't take a train wreck to get us engaged?
Well, again, I think that, you know, all the things that I mentioned, you know, writing your member of Congress, writing your senators, writing the president, writing letters to the editor, Facebook posts, read the Facebooks, and when somebody says something silly, call them on it, and just be totally engaged. Come to meetings like this.
I'm wondering, because we do have so many problems with insurance, and everyone keeps attacking it through the insurance side, but is there any way at the federal level to keep the costs of medical down in order to keep the insurance costs down? Because the medical insurance are billing whatever they want, whenever they want, as much as they want. There should be some controls on that to keep the insurance costs down instead of continually trying to figure out how to pay more insurance.
You're absolutely correct, and there's a number of things I think can be done in the Affordable Care Act to address that issue. One of the big price drivers, and it affects the insurance companies markedly, is the cost of prescription drugs. So there should be some greater effort in Congress to make sure that we're able to keep those down. One way, and we tried to deal with it when we wrote the Affordable Care Act, and just determined at some point that the proverbial juice wasn't worth the squeeze, that there was so much pushback from it, and that's the public advertisement of pharmaceuticals. I can't tell you how many healthcare professionals come to me and say, somebody comes in, I say, I'm going to prescribe this. They say, no, I want the one I saw on Channel 5. And it's a racket. And these guys are able to write off all their advertising costs. And the only benefit that I've seen from pharmaceutical companies being able to advertise on television is this latest one about opioid constipation relief.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that, is if there's anybody in the world left who doesn't believe we have an opioid addiction problem in this country, you need to watch TV. When they're advertising for the pharmaceutical companies are advertising for the pill to address the constipation brought on by opioids, you know there's a problem. So that's a way. That's another way to do it. And again, I think the public option is a way, because that's the hammer against in regard to competition. When these guys are driving up, you say, well, why would I go with you when I can go with the public option and get it cheaper? I think that has a tendency to drive the price down. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to speak with us. I have been a registered Democrat since the first time I could vote. I've been voting Democrat all my life. I am so disheartened with the Democratic National Committee and the people in Washington and what they did in our last election that I stopped paying my dues to our local party. I went yesterday and I said, well, we're on the right page. I'm going to pay my dues again. They stand up, I hear Nancy Pelosi say, what can we do? We got to bring our voters back. But they are not listening to the voters. They didn't listen to the voters when we said we've got the vote for Bernie Sanders, and they forced it and put Hillary in to the tune of so badly that Deborah Wasserman Schultz had to resign. What can we do to get the DNC to listen to the voice of the people that they want so badly to vote for them, and get them to stop lining their pockets, just like the Republicans, the lobbyists in Washington?
Well, I don't know how, if you're on the DNC, you line your pockets.
Our Congress. It's on our Congress.
Pardon me?
Our Congress people. I don't think it's any different.
That includes you.
I'm going to say thank you for not doing that, but I'm sorry that I feel that you are not in the majority, and they're not listening to us. They're listening to the big money.
I don't think that you can line your pockets. I think if you are, you're breaking the law. So let me rephrase that. It's not that you can't do it. You can't rob you can't rob banks either, but people do it. So I'm assuming Congress is representative of the people that elect us. So there's good people and bad people on both sides. And I suspect some people are doing things they shouldn't do. There's this talk right now about a group of folks who have been trading on healthcare stock and made a ton of dough on that. That's illegal to do. You can't do it. The rules are extremely strict on what a member of Congress can do in the stock market. And if they find out that these guys are doing what they have alleged to have done, they're going to pay a pretty stiff penalty for that. Now, I agree with you that there is undue influence in political money. And I think that's a huge problem. I believe that the biggest thing to change that would be to reverse the Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court that allows for dark money. Truth of the matter is, if you have full transparency and disclosure, I think voters are smart enough to make up their own mind. But with the dark money, where people can spend millions of dollars in an election without their fingerprints, their name, their association, that becomes a huge problem. Now, I've been around long enough where I've run for office in just about every imaginable campaign finance situation. When I first ran for the state senate, I ran against an entrenched incumbent who was the Republican leader of the state senate in a district that was drawn just for him. And the rules at that time were you couldn't take more than $1,000 from anybody. Well, the truth is, in our district, Lake County was part of that first district. If you all were around then, it was Sonoma, Napa, Lake, Colusa, Glenn, Butte, Tehama, and Shasta County. Now, if you rounded up all the Democrats in that district, there were very few who could give me $1,000.
Yeah.
But a big percentage of those few could give me $5,000 or $10,000. On the other side of the aisle, it was just the opposite. There were a lot of people who could write $1,000 checks. So I was at a real disadvantage in that race. So I had to make every dollar that I raised spend 10 times. So I've been through just about all of them, and so I know how difficult it is. I know what sometimes works and what sometimes doesn't work. But bottom line, full disclosure and transparency, I think, is the best prescription. And to get the dark money out, I think, would be an important step forward.
Question?
Yeah.
Thank you. When President Obama was elected and the Republicans said we're not going to do anything to help him, and they fought him at every turn, I was opposed to that. I thought that if the people had spoken and elected a president, we should get behind him and try to make him as successful as we can make him. I feel the same way about this president. He does silly things, but nevertheless, he was elected by the majority of the people in the United States, or at least, wait, let me qualify that. Or at least the college was elected. Which is, by the way, the only thing the Constitution talks about. It doesn't talk about popular votes.
The biggest electoral college majority in the history of the world.
So anyway, getting past that, he is the president. And I'd like for both parties to get together, and the Republicans and the Democrats say to each other, what can we do to make a better life for all of us? Can we work together on some things? I disagree with you on a lot of things, but that doesn't mean I know it's a shock. But nevertheless, you're my congressman, and I respect you, and I want to try to help you be successful. And I think we owe that to every elected official. Number one thing I think we should do is immediately outlaw the DNC and the RNC and make all public officials that want to run for office get all of their money from their constituents instead of getting it from dark money, from unions, from this, from that, and be on the take and be dependent, being dependent on the big money. Now, if you don't think that all the politicians are dependent on big money, then you've been sniffing the stuff that you shouldn't sniff. But get rid of the DNC and the RNC and make us, if you want my vote, you have to, and my money, then you have to take care of me and my friends and my people. I don't see anything wrong with that. The DNC and the RNC have taken over the political machine. Now that they can get all the dark money they can get, they dole it out to the people that vote with them.
Well, the dark money issue, the Citizens United thing, is not through the RNC or the DNC.
They're benefiting.
That's done separate and apart by, you fill in the blank, who the committee that raises the dough to do that. I'll try and respond to that. First, to do what you want to do, you have to get rid of the First Amendment of the Constitution. That's true. People have a constitutional right to voice their opinion, to be able to raise money, and to be able to support the candidate of his or her choice.
So getting rid of dark money would get rid of the First Amendment also?
No.
Oh, it would?
No, because it would. The money, you can still give the money, you just have to disclose it. It has to be disclosed where the money came from. The other issue, and I want to go back to where you started, when you said the Republicans said they weren't going to work with President Obama. That's not what was said. If you recall what Mitch McConnell said.
One term.
He said, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure this guy is not reelected.
Top priority.
Top priority, number one priority. And then I want to advance forward to something that I said right away after the election. I was not happy with the outcome of this election. I think I don't think it's good for our country. I don't think this guy is good for anything. And the people he's brought into the White House, the last was a Scaramucci guy. I don't think he's good for our children. I don't think he's good for our future. But the first thing I said was, I will work with anybody, this president included, to advance the priorities of our district, our state, and our country. And if you look at my record, for the entire time I've been in Congress, I have one of the highest percentages of bipartisan legislation, both Republicans co-authoring my bills and me co-sponsoring Republican bills. And then lastly, I just want to say, irrespective of who the president is or what the president's party is, if that president is going to do something that's going to be harmful to our 5th congressional district, our state, or our country, I'll fight him to the mat. And I haven't seen anything yet that this president has done that appears as though he wants to work with anybody across the aisle to do anything that would help our district or our country. And the last example of that was when local law enforcement from our district came to me with a concern. And it was a Homeland Security concern. And local cops told me that they, for years, have worked to build a relationship between the immigrant communities and law enforcement. And they said it works. It's working well. If there's a crime in the immigrant community, they come to us, they report it. If there's a crime witnessed in the immigrant community, they come to us, they work with us. So now with this, this doubling down on with ICE, it's causing a problem, and ICE shows up with these jackets and these vests. If you've seen them, it says police in big letters. And then underneath in small letters it says ICE. And so my local cops tell me that this is divisive, that the immigrant community sees police on the jacket, they relate it to the police in the community, they're not getting the same cooperation, there's problems, and they said it's a public safety issue. And I took that to then Secretary Kelly, now Chief of Staff Kelly, and he said, yeah, I'm not doing anything about it. So that's not working with, one of the important things when you're a cabinet secretary is you look at everything. What are the problems? You try and figure them out. And when local law enforcement comes forward and says, this is a problem, it's causing a public safety hazard in the communities, and the administration says, nah, tough, we're not doing anything about it, we're doing it our way. That's a real problem. So I'll work with this president, and I've already told you I believe that tax reform is important, and I'm supportive of tax reform. I believe infrastructure is important, and I'm supportive of investment in infrastructure. I'm not going to support an infrastructure bill that makes all of you pay twice. And that's the proposal out of the White House, is to do just that. Turn it over to the private sector, and you pay by a loss of funds to the Treasury, and then you turn around and pay to use it. And that's not right. You're already paying for infrastructure investment. And I'm not going to support tax reform that's not paid for, that doesn't focus on the middle class and the working class people. It's got to be middle class out tax reform, and it's got to be paid for.
I'm wondering about, we've heard every president, most all of them since Truman, assure us that they've negotiated a deal with North Korea, that they've resolved the problem, and every time it's like a chamber speech. Particularly in the 90s, we gave them a bunch of money. If you get into talks now, suppose you strike a deal with them, how much paper is that? Why would this be any different than what we've already seen over and over again?
Well, there's no effort right now on anybody's part to start those negotiations. I think that's important to do. I guess the effort that we've heard was from the president of South Korea. who wants to negotiate with North Korea. And there's other dynamics in the area that, that can't be left out. China, who the president said was going to be the miracle worker in all of this. We know that the same day that they announced they were going to not buy coal, their imports from North Korea and other areas went up 40%. So they were not an honest broker in this. And remember, China has a real concern about a reunited Korea. They know that they would be a significant competitor, and so they've got concerns about that. And I just don't know how credible a Chinese alliance would be. We have to really think that out also. And we can't, I just, for the life of me, I can't understand how this president can be so belligerent in regard to what North Korea is doing, when the ones who, notwithstanding the fact that intelligence suggests that they can deliver a nuclear weapon to any place in the United States, they can do it right next door in South Korea. And all of this has been done without any coordination with the South Koreans. And as I mentioned, he hasn't even appointed an ambassador to South Korea. That's a huge problem.
First, I'd like to say I appreciate everything that you've said tonight. I agree with all you've said. I'm really glad you're our congressman.
I'm going home.
Stop right now.
Regarding Citizen United, there's also something called the American Anti-Corruption Act. It's sort of like model legislation that some cities and places have already put in, but it's a way of getting money out all together, and there's a website, it's something to look at. I think it would be helpful. But my question is, income and wealth equality continues to grow. Middle class is hurting. You mentioned tax reform, which could hopefully help the middle class. What are some other things that we could do? I realize that with our current administration, there's probably not a lot that can be done, but if we were in power, what kinds of things do you think Congress could do to help out the income inequality?
Well, as you say, we're not in power. If we were, I'd start with fixing the Affordable Care Act and doing the public option. I think that would help a lot. And I don't know if you saw the job growth for the month of July. The number 2 job sector was healthcare. And that's kind of overlooked in the whole healthcare discussion. The number of healthcare jobs that have come about since the Affordable Care Act was passed. That's a big growth area, to the point where folks can't get healthcare providers. When I was up at the hospital today, they asked me, I have 2 business cards in my pocket from Sutter Health, asking if you know any nurses who want a job, please call us. So there's a lot of growth potential there, and that should be nurtured and should not be cut off. In the same area of healthcare, in the kind of the social service area, the continued efforts to dismantle Medicare is a huge problem. There are millions of Americans who depend upon Medicare, and the idea that you would do away with that is frightening for me. And remember, Tom Price was on the tip of the spear on that. As my colleague on the Ways and Means Committee, he was always trying to figure out how to blow up Medicare. And so that effort is still alive. And the effort to privatize Social Security is a very alarming thing. The most successful government program in the history of everything. And the idea of privatizing that should send chills down everyone's spine. And if you're not on Medicare and you're not on Social Security, you're still affected by it. Because every Social Security dollar, every Medicare dollar that comes in to Lake County, the majority of those are spent right here in Lake County. I doubt if there's many people here, well, maybe you, who has, but he may be the only one, who has an offshore account in the Cayman Islands.
Oh, yeah. I'm still looking for it. I put it somewhere.
The truth of the matter is, when folks that we know get their Social Security check, they're not sending it to the Caymans. They're spending it. They're paying their rent, their house payment, their electricity bill. So that spends multiple times throughout the community. So stopping the disruption of that is important. I think that something that I would do immediately if I were the benevolent dictator or in the majority, but I think it's something we can do in a bipartisan manner. That's investment in infrastructure. That creates a lot of jobs. And I said in regard to tax reform, I thought it had to address middle class and working class people. And not only in regard to a reduction in the taxes that they pay, but I think that there's some aspirational things that we can do in tax reform that would really help that group of people and the future generations from that group of people. And I'm working on legislation right now to figure out how to provide tax incentives for educational opportunities for people in the middle and working class area. And not just higher ed. Everybody knows that higher ed is way too expensive. We've got kids that are getting out of college now with triple-digit student loans that they have to pay back. Not only is that crippling for them and their families, but it's crippling for us too. Because the bigger your college loan debt is, the longer it's going to take you to be fully vested in a community. The longer before you can buy a car, before you can buy a house, before you can buy a property, whatever. So that hurts the entire community. So I want to do something to incentivize education opportunities, because that allows people not only get the education and do it without harming them economically, but it gives them an opportunity for bigger and better things than they ordinarily would have had. And not just higher ed, low tech, high tech, career training, any of those educational opportunities where someone can, after completing that, can get a better deal out of life for themselves. I think we ought to be supported, because I don't think anybody would disagree that the middle class and the working class people need a better deal. We haven't had it for a long time.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming also, and for your service, and I'd like to thank you and any other veteran here for your service. I have a couple comments which might not be too popular here tonight. First of all, I think one of the big ways that we can give our tax money back is I do not appreciate the Affordable Care Act, because I feel like it's one of the biggest taxes that was ever put on the middle class. My statement says that so much of my money that I pay goes to support those who can't. And I don't make that much more than those other people around me that I'm paying for. I don't have, my health care has doubled. My deductible has gone up, skyrocketing. I don't have any choice of doctors. Half of the doctors I take don't take the Affordable Care Act. I was put on the Affordable Care Act without my asking, yet I pay twice the price of what I used to, and I am not happy with it. You said you write that legislation. Can you tell me how many pages are in it?
I don't know how many pages are in it.
Absolutely. Nobody knows how many pages.
Well, no, that's not true. No, wait, that's not true. You're not.
That is out of control.
You're not accurate, ma'am.
Okay.
You're not accurate.
How many pages are in there?
How many pages are in the Bible?
Good question. Depending on the Bible.
58 books.
How many pages?
You know what? The Bible is somebody's choice. This is
What
something that's
what
forced
does
on
it
me
matter?
without my voting for it? Excuse me, I don't mean to be unpopular here. I just want to throw that little wrench in here that nobody's asking. Why did my health care have to go up double so I could pay for people who don't? And by the way, I work for with NCO. I work for nonprofit organizations, and we go out and we help people all the time. I work with people at NCO, and the majority of the people that we are giving food to are people that are getting their checks from Social Security because they don't make enough money. I think the problem with America is instead of being Republican or Democrat, we need to be Americans, and we need to not make these bills so huge that nobody understands what they're voting for. And not just push your agenda on everybody, but look at everybody's agenda, what works for all of us. I'm just saying that's just something I am not happy with. I'm not saying I'm not happy with you. There's a lot that you do that I appreciate. There's finally something, Fletcher, that you and I can agree with. We should appreciate those who are in, who are our leaders, because we did vote them in. And I'm sick and tired of the division. I think we need to come together. And I would like to see the Affordable Care Act gone so we can make something better. That's just my point of view.
Okay. Let me just speak to some of them. And my point on the pages, it doesn't matter how many pages are in the bill. What matters is it working? And we know that 25 million people today have health care that they didn't have before. And we know if the Affordable Care Act is repealed, that 25 people will lose their health care, millions of people will lose their jobs. We also know that, and contrary to what you said, you don't buy the Affordable Care Act. What the Affordable Care Act is a law that determines how the healthcare system works to an extent. So if you buy insurance through an exchange, every one of those policies has to meet a certain requirement. In the past, there were a lot of people who were purchasing health care at a very cheap price. Problem was, if they became sick or injured, the policies didn't cover their illness or their injury.
But that wasn't true.
Well, I don't know what, I'm just telling you the background of the bill. And what the Affordable Care Act did was it set standards for health coverage, health policies that are sold, essential health benefits. And they're called essential health benefits because they are.
Mandates.
If you get sick or you get injured, you can't go to the hospital and then they say, well, we don't cover broken arms and we don't cover appendix and we don't cover whatever it is. It's in the law. They have to cover this. They also have to provide preventive health care services at no charge. And the idea is that it addresses the whole individual. So you get you're trying to make the whole person better rather than waiting till you're in an acute situation. The law changed how health care is delivered. Get people to go to a family practice doc and be cared for on a continuum rather than going to the emergency room, which is extremely more expensive than regular care. And yes, prices have gone up. Prices have gone up with or without the Affordable Care Act. And the data shows that the prices with the Affordable Care Act have gone up less than they would have gone up and were going up before without the Affordable Care Act. And you know that's a fact in California because the California legislature required healthcare companies to post their 2018 prices. And they required them to do it this year, both with the Affordable Care Act and without the Affordable Care Act. And you know what the numbers are. Twice as much without the Affordable Care Act. So that's from the people selling the product. Now, back to what I had said earlier, there are things that can be fixed. There are issues that can be addressed and it can be improved. But throwing it out isn't the way to go. I will liken it to, I want to remodel my kitchen, so I'm going to burn down my house. And I don't think that's
Okay, my daughter was one of those people who now has insurance because she had to pay through the IRS, mind you, that is running our insurance, our healthcare system now, to...
No, they're
she
not.
got
No, they're not. That's not true.
Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, we're not in a debate here, not right here. We understand you don't like the product. You got 2 minutes.
She had to buy insurance that absolutely has nothing to help her, because if she didn't buy it, she was taxed by the IRS, which goes up double each year. My daughter now, oh yeah, she's insured for nothing. She just pays for something that she doesn't get, or she gets taxed by the IRS. I'm just really angry.
And it's very true, okay? And we all, believe me, as a business enterprise and that, I've seen it grind up too. But the issue is this: he's answered what he can, and he's done a great job at it. You put your point. It's an individual thing. You need to address it as an individual deal versus here.
Jackie. You only had 2 minutes, let me jump in. I just want to say, this is a one-sided conversation. I have the right
Your
to
side.
put something else in there. Everybody's asking what affects them, I'm asking what affects me. And I would just like to know how to make these bills a little less bloviated, so we can all understand what we're getting into, even though that was the worst thing.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you for your time.
Yes.
I have a completely different question altogether.
Oh.
We have a beautiful lake in the middle of our county. Unfortunately, it's a mess, and we need help cleaning it up. We're having problems at the county level, at the state level. Is there any help at the federal level that could come in and help us with cleaning up our lake so that it could be more enjoyable again?
What I've done is ask the Department of Agriculture if they can weigh in on this. Cecilia Aguilar Curry has created this council with state experts to provide assistance, I think probably more technical assistance than anything at this point. And I've asked that the Department of Ag, if it makes sense for them to join and lend, their expertise. So we're running that out right now.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask, with regards to the Affordable Care Act, and I'm not trying to stir any pots or anything like that, are you in favor then of debating and negotiating with other parties to try and find a way to move forward and keep what works and throw out what's not?
Absolutely. And there seems to be an effort to do that more prominent on the Senate side with Patty Murray and Lamar Alexander. So they're looking for ways to provide a fix.
So how would you handle and work with your colleagues in the House to create a situation where at that level there's also a sense of compromise rather than stalemate?
There's a lot of discussion in the House about moving in that direction. And there was a lot of people in the House that took a real bad vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and it's hurt them badly in their districts. And I think there's an interest on their part to work together. And I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to work with folks on the other side of the aisle. I had 2 bills passed last week, both of which were bipartisan bills. And I try and do that. I don't think good public policy, especially on big issues, can be, I don't think public policy can be good if it's not bipartisan, especially on big issues. And I went to the extreme 3 weeks ago in my house in DC. I cooked dinner for 3 Democratic colleagues and 3 Republican colleagues.
Wow. Only 3 walked out.
I'd like to make one other comment on the law enforcement thing.
On the which?
The law enforcement, you said they were coming to you and saying it's
Right.
causing a lot of heartburn. My son-in-law is a police officer in Washington, and he's...
State?
Washington State. And he's having a problem with it from a different standpoint. He says, I trained and joined the police force to have a good career and to serve and to protect. I did not join to be told you don't have to protect the guy's head when you stuff him in the car. I want to do my job right, and I really don't want to be forced to take a tax-paying father away from his dreamer child and send him back to Mexico when he's done nothing wrong. He says, I'm worried I'm going to have to quit my job.
And that's, your son's not alone. I have one of my sons a deputy sheriff in Napa, and he understands the law, and law enforcement spoke out pretty loudly and fairly clearly on what the president said, this nonsense about bang their head and stuff. That was totally inappropriate.
Yep.
and illegal and unconstitutional. And cops do want to do the right thing, and cops are not immigration officers.
That's right.
They have
That's
a job
not their
to do.
job.
They don't enforce the federal law. There's a jurisdiction for that, and the idea that they would make them do that is inappropriate.
On that, I know that you back agriculture and whatnot, but I'm just wondering what is going forward with like supporting our ag labor force. So, are our H-2A visas getting easier to obtain, or like we're not helping our local farm workers? It takes almost 6 years to be able to legally work here, and our ag industry will completely fail without them.
Yeah, and I think it's getting worse, not better. And you saw last week when the president and 2 members of the Senate had a press conference in announcing their new legislation that would cut immigration numbers in half. It's devastating. And it's not just devastating to us here, it's agriculture across the country, it's hospitality across the country, it's the construction trades. People are having a real hard time hiring people to do work right now, and this idea that if you make immigration tougher, it's going to create more jobs for U.S. It's just ludicrous.
Why don't do that job?
Well, I'll go one further. They can't do that job.
Yeah.
They can't do it, and there's just not enough people to do all the jobs that are out there right now. We're pretty much at full employment. And I'm sure there's people who are looking for a job and can't find one, but we're pretty much cooking.
So we're doing nothing. I mean, our ag labor force is aging, and even to come over illegally, the smugglers that used to bring people over are now charging $5,000 or more, or they're just not doing it anymore.
That's very
They get over here and they're stuck.
There's not a good environment for working on immigration legislation right now. And I think you know that. We're talking about every other word is build the wall, and now it's 30 feet tall with solar on top. So it's not a good environment. A few years ago, when efforts to do comprehensive immigration reform came apart, a number of us got together and we took pieces of the comprehensive bill and introduced it. I agreed to take the one on veterans, on immigration for veterans and their families, and I have a Republican co-author. This is our 3rd Congress introducing it now, and we've been told in no uncertain terms that this bill is not even going to get a hearing. We have a new ag jobs bill, immigration bill. My first term in Congress, I supported the ag jobs bill that Howard Berman had in the House, Dianne Feinstein and Larry Craig had in the Senate. That's gone nowhere as well. It's a huge problem, and to get the attention of the folks who set the agenda in Washington, we're going to have a full-throated effort by the business community, the Farm Bureau, all the different ag groups, the chambers of commerce, the people who the majority party listens to. They're going to have to get on board and really push for this.
May I? So at risk of possibly doing something that could harm myself and the place where I come from, I wanted to know how you feel about this new bill that they're trying to push through about not allowing people to divest from Israel and sort of censoring our free speech. Now, we can take this outside and you can talk to me later about it, but it's something that I wrote you about and that I feel is not going to help Israel at all. And I would like to have the opportunity to either explain that to you or for you to tell me how you feel.
Okay, you can explain to me.
Okay, that would be great. Okay. And how do you feel about it?
I don't think I know the issue.
All right,
not divest.
Why don't you talk to that afterwards,
yes.
Because otherwise
Very
we're
happily.
too much time.
Very happily.
All right.
Anything else?
That.
Good. I mean,
I do have
serious,
two
just-
questions
we're just
of the
treading
congressman,
water.
and then I'm sure he's had such a long day, he'd like to move on.
I want to say one thing before I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
You asked me about those deals that meet Mike Monday.
Yeah.
And I just want to tell you that today when we were coming up, we were shooting some footage to put in it, and we came by a vineyard in Pope Valley, and my guy from Washington's out here, and I said, don't shoot that vineyard. That's a political problem with that, and it speaks to your issue. Because when I was in the state senate, there was a beautiful field in Pope Valley that was filled with heritage oak trees. And I'm an oak tree guy. I up until a few years ago, I had 2 giant heritage oak trees in my yard. And sadly, I had to take one down because it was going to fall down. And it was hard for me. So hard that I gave all the firewood away. I didn't even want to burn firewood. And I kept one stump to put my anvil on. And that's my remembrance of that tree. And there was legislation going through the Senate dealing with heritage oak trees at the time. And I was getting a lot of phone calls from constituents, and don't mandate what we can do with our trees. On a 4-day weekend, the vineyard company that owned that property came in with a crew that was bigger than anything we've ever seen, and they cut down every one of those trees.
That's going to happen here if we don't do
They
something.
cut down every one of those trees. So, and it was a 4-day weekend, nobody could respond.
Right.
They did it
And
in
then
Valley too.
they, rather than asking for permission,
Yes.
instead they begged for forgiveness. And so there was a lot of firewood made, and they've had to mitigate it. They've had to plant a bunch of other.
It's not the
trees.
same planting, right?
But my point is, my phone calls changed after that happened. The same people, and Pope Valley is a pretty conservative area, the same people who were calling me about not supporting the bill, the next day were calling me, you better get that bill passed right away.
All right. My 2 questions to you, sir. First of all, on tax reform, what are the 2 most important items that you can come up with that would get you to vote for a tax reform? The second,
It's got to be revenue neutral, and it's got to be from the middle class out.
okay, but we all say there's so much waste in Washington, there's got to be something that stands out, right?
In regard to what? The tax bill?
Tax bill, right. Tax reform, that we can cut this, and that would be something.
Well, I think everything's on the table, but I don't think it's anywhere close to that simple. Every component of the tax statute is there because there's a constituency behind it. I'll tell you a story. I was giving a speech in downtown Washington the other day to the 1031 people. You know what 1031 is?
Yeah.
The like-kind exchange. So if you sell your property, you can buy something else at another price, and you don't have to pay tax on the cap gains from the sale. It's been a great tool for middle-class people to work their way up the economic change. And there was about 150 people in the room, and they were all there to preserve the like-kind 1031 exchange. And there was one guy, and they're from all over the country, there was one guy from San Francisco, and he said, why don't you just, this tax reform is going to be a big heavy lift, why don't you just narrow it down and get all the common sense stuff and pass that and start there. And I said, well, that all depends on what you define as common sense stuff.
Right,
and he goes, the common sense stuff, all the stuff that everybody agrees on. And I said, like the 1031 exchange. He goes, exactly. And I said, now there's 40 other hotel conference rooms in Washington, D.C. today with somebody like me talking to somebody like you who's here for another common sense item that shouldn't be dropped from the tax code. And that's the reality. So it's not that simple. I think everything has to be looked at. You figure out what the cost neutrality point is, and then you go from there. If it was that simple, it would just be a math problem.
Yeah. Okay, last and final thing, and move on. And pardon me if I offend, I'm going to say this probably wrong. Lake County is a wonderful place. It really is. However, it has struggled economically.
Well, that's
for
a newsflash.
Yeah, for various reasons. And a lot of it I look at internal, okay? However, is there something from your standpoint that could help us attract? I look at certain federal projects that have occurred in other locations that might fit in the Lake County.
Like what?
One that sticks out in my mind is and it happened a couple of years ago out by Draper, Utah, the new Homeland Security, I believe it was.
You need to speak up.
That's why they gave me a mic. Out in Draper, Utah, the federal government built a very large, to support Homeland Security, I believe it was, employs like 10,000 or something like that. It was a big economic boom in that neck of the woods. Of course, I think if Lake County is given the opportunity, we can sell a very good reason to set up shop here.
Well, remember, anytime anything like that happens, and I'm sure there's, pork involved in some of those decisions, and you know that, you all remember the highway to nowhere in Alaska, that issue?
Yep.
That's what brought about the end of earmarks. It used to be that members of Congress could write into appropriation bills earmarks, and I believe earmarks should come back. I think it's a good thing. I'm not opposed to earmarks. I don't think there's any bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. that knows more about Lake County than I do. And if I have a project that I'm supporting and I want to earmark some federal funds for it, I think that I know better than anybody else the value of doing that. That highway to nowhere caused a big stir, and the response was, and the pendulum often swings too far the other way, was just to do away with earmarks. And it's been a problem. It's created problems for passing budgets, for instance. Before you could say, we need your vote for this, and I know you need that overpass, and we'll help you out. And that's as unseemly as that sounds, it's true. And if somebody needed my vote in order to provide a new road in the middle of Lake County, and Lake County needed a road, that's not the worst thing that could possibly happen. But earmarks went away, and I'll tell you, I had a town hall meeting in Fort Bragg or Mendocino a few years back, and that was in a district. And the first question, the guy got up and he started in thanking me for this money I got for a trail in Fort Bragg that incorporated this old timber site into downtown Fort Bragg, and how wonderful it was going to be, and provide recreational opportunities and tourism opportunities, and it incorporates this into the city. Wow, it was almost ad nauseum. I was afraid people were going to think I paid him to say that. And then he said, however, I have a concern. And then he said, when are you going to get the guts to end these earmarks? So this is just killing us. And I said, well, thank you for the praise on the trail. I said, I just want you to know that was an earmark. And he said, I had no idea. So they got kind of a bad rap because of a couple of bad earmarks. So I think that would help a lot if those were able to come back, because there's a lot of places around the country that are hurting and that could use some help from the federal government. Now, having said that, you need to know that projects like that all emanate from the local community. So it's not just, hey, we've got 3 federal buildings, where are we going to put them? Somebody's got to say, well, there's a need for something here, or in this area, where would be a good place to park it? And where do we have the workforce? Where do we have the property? And it all depends on necessity and appropriateness before that happens. And it starts at the community level. So it's not hey, we need to spur some economic development in XYZ area. Let's park a building there. We have a need to put this building someplace. Where should it go?
And I want to thank Congressman Thompson, because he explained it just perfect as far as this community goes. And some of the things that have been going on and the future. thank him for his service to the country, for his service to our community. And this is about the third or fourth time he has come here, given his time, spent all time. Also for Brad, working with us to set things up. I will tell you all, this gentleman is available to you all the time, either via his office or himself when he's here. And with that, thank you, sir. And have a wonderful night. Okay, real quick, anybody have items they'd like to put on next month's agenda? We're open for discussion real quick here. Okay, here, oh,
Is Caltrans on the agenda next month?
Nope, not at this point.
not at this point, no.
Can we request it to see if they're available for next
To
month?
do what?
To talk to us about the Highway 175 project?
I can put another email into them and see what comes back again, similar to last month, which I was not here, but Fletcher read to y'all, so we can do that. I do know, and I will say, right now, we're gonna have, the Livermore is on the schedule, that ranch, and also Dollar General will be on the schedule for next month.
Oh, good grief.
Yes, Michael?
Location of Valley Fire Memorial.
Valley Fire Memorial?
Location of.
Location up, okay, on the agenda? Anything other?
Oh, I'm so glad Dollar.
Can the oak tree
The oak tree is...
discussion be on the agenda? Guidelines, something?
What do you have in mind?
What you got in mind?
Maybe we need to start dialoguing about guidelines for developing with oak trees.
Put it on for discussion, not an action item.
A discussion.
A discussion item?
Great.
We'll do that. Anything else? With all that, thank you all for your...
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Everybody's happy? See ya. Have a good night. Thanks.